he said what made music so incredible going into the 70s and whatever was you had Bob Dylan, the voice of the generation, John Lennon, the rock star, and they switched places.
Americana as a genre has been mysterious to me, and I have a real advocate of Americana music joining us today. And I want to welcome Bob Williams to the
Hey,
Long Island Sound podcast. Welcome, Bob.
so happy to be here.
Great to have you. And I expect you're going to educate me on many things. And I was looking at one of the organizations that you're involved with, and we'll talk about that. But I got to read this because I thought it was so captivating and gave me a clear understanding of Americana. And this is what it says. Americana roots music styles include country, roots rock, folk, bluegrass, R&B, and blues, resulting in distinctive roots-oriented sound that lives in a world apart from the pure forms and the genres on which they draw. And I thought whoever wrote that really cleared things up for me.
Yeah, I didn't write that.
Yeah, so Bob's originally from Massapequa. In our discussions, the Beatles really kicked it off for you. And what amazed me was you said you picked up the guitar, you learned the famous 3 chords,
Yeah.
and then you started writing music, which I thought that was phenomenal. Bring me back to that moment of where you got inspired with the music bug.
Well, like I'm going to be 72 in May. Pretty much everybody my age, nobody I have missed, nobody who plays guitar didn't see the Beatles on Ed Sullivan.
Right.
So
Yep.
that's a thing, So I would just say, I really wasn't good. I wasn't really learning. I had no lessons or anything. And I got a chord book and it had the little box in there. And this is a G chord. This is a C chord. This is a D. And I had the guitar in my hands all the time. In fact, I never stopped. And I didn't know any songs. I didn't know any lessons. I just started strumming chords, and then I just started writing songs about how miserable and how lonely I was, I was like 13, 14 years old. So it was all that kind of stuff. And I just never stopped. I just started writing, and I always wrote. I threw away all that stuff from as a kid. But I have stuff from the 80s on. And I still play some of my songs from the 80s.
That's so interesting because of the conversations that I've had with people, a lot of it has been fascinated by the Beatles, want to cover their songs and work to cover a lot of people's songs. But you jumped right into songwriting, which I think is fantastic. How does the muse strike you now as opposed to when you were a younger man?
Well, I've written all the relationship songs a 72-year-old needs to write. Okay. So, but no, it's kind of funny. I was single on Long Island from 30 to 40. And that is still a graveyard I'm digging up bones for. Lots of stuff. Okay. So that's there. And I'm very fortunate. My wife, when I do, I do songs and I play and I tell the stories behind the songs. And I'm always bringing up old girlfriends as part of the stories. In fact, once in a while, I get a Facebook post from somebody asking, "Is that song about me?" And so what's different is, I have a lifetime of experience, and I have other things to write about. But I'm still can tie into. I can write a ballad in G pretty quick. I can just go right there. It's easy for me to do. But I try to write. I'm an Americana folk singer. The most boring thing in the world is when someone comes out with an album like that and it's all just a couple chords and it's all 100 beats per minute and it just becomes boring. So I like to do stuff that's up tempo and this, that, and the other thing. But the muse is still, I'm working on 5 songs right now.
Wow.
So I'm always working on something. The other day, I have a friend who does PBS songwriters, stories of songwriters. He interviews Hall of Fame people, and we were having dinner, country music Hall of Fame people, and he said to me, "Well, what was your favorite concert?" And I said, "Oh, I've been to a million concerts, not a million, a lot of concerts." I said, "But you know what? I would rather hear somebody who's not a celebrity, an acoustic guitar and a broken heart." And as soon as those words came out of my mouth, I'm like, "All right, I got to go in the other room and start working on this song," which is what I did. So So the muse is always there. It's always listening and just whatever, it's there.
Now, if we go back to your early years, I think one of the comments you made was you had a lot of garage bands and never made it past the driveway. And I think there's a song in that as well.
Thank you.
What was, Americana to me in the
Well, I
past?
wasn't playing Americana, don't forget.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
What my point being is Americana seemed to be a catch-all for me. What drew you to that
Oh,
genre
okay,
of
well,
music over time?
it's an interesting thing. A kid, well, as I think we were talking the other day, and I said, the Beatles turned the lights on. When I heard the Birds, I knew what I wanted to sound like. And so that never left me. So I always, I don't know how I knew who Graham Parson was. I just knew. I kind of remembered Johnny Cash thinking he was more rockabilly. So that music was always there for me. Yeah, it was always, I almost forgot the question.
About what drew you to Americana music?
Yeah, so what drew me to Americana is, my definition of Americana, it's a catch-all. When people like Rodney Crowell, Amy Lou Harris, Steve Earle couldn't get on country, they kind of came up with another thing, America. So it's a catch-all, it's open. But to me, it also means it's not over sophisticated. It's not polished like, this is my version of it. And a lot of times I tell people, I'll tell you what it really is. This is the unofficial version. It's singers-songwriters from the 70s. That's, Jackson Brown, it's James Taylor. To me, now anybody can argue, but this is just my little thing.
I agree with you, Bob, because that kind of the Laurel Canyon mindset, the singer-songwriters, that's where I gravitate to. That's my wheelhouse, so to speak. And what kind of amazed me over the past few years was the wellspring of talent, not only that are still in Long Island, but that kind of gone around the country. And you're in Florida now and you have a connection to North Carolina. Tell me about the music scenes both in Fort Myers and in North Carolina.
Okay, well, it's kind of very different. So
Okay.
I'm the vice president for the Americana Community Music Association, which is we rent a listening room. We rent a Unitarian congregation, but we also do concerts other places. And we bring in under the wire, should be famous people that are touring artists out there. We always have a local open. I work with over 60 local singer-songwriters.
Wow.
So then we put on songwriter rounds, which is all local. So we are really the only people in Southwest Florida that promote original music. You're not going to hear it in the bars. You're not going to hear it anywhere. You're not going to hear it in breweries. Generally, you're just not going to hear it. I'm also involved with another not-for-profit. I live in Black Mountain, right outside of Asheville in North Carolina, and it's the White Horse. And that's another venue that recently became a not-for-profit also. But they have all types of music. But the thing about no one's playing Mustang Sally in Asheville.
Okay.
They're not playing Brown Eyed Girl. The only way you're going to hear Brown Eyed Girl is if Van Morrison shows up. No one's going to play that. So there's so much original music there. It's drastically different.
Yeah. You know what? And I've seen this on Long Island where there's this competition. And let's talk about the business of music in that people who are getting gigs, everyone does covers of something, but they're few and far between. I can, put them on one hand of venues that are really into original music. And after reading what you've done with, Song in the Round and these organizations, it's so fantastic to find that you're giving a stage for really some great artists and some great music that you can understand and hear the words and pull the heartstrings on.
I mean, what's needed is a listening room. I was running a concert series on the beach here, Songwriters at Sunset. We were getting 800 to 1,000 people.
Really?
And I would start off when I emceed it and go, and it would be people that nobody knew, just local songwriters, but it was a free thing on the beach at Sunset. And I would go, anybody here that wants to talk, just walk away. And if someone's talking, you basically can walk up to anybody and go, shh, because we want to hear the music. That's what we're here for. So if you're not here for the music, go take a walk. And we would have like 800 people being quiet, listening. So that, we had PA system and all that, but it's still, so that's the worst thing is, the worst thing in the world is people spending $100 to go to a concert just to talk. So, you know,
I think we've all had this sister-in-law or brother-in-law who's yapping away and you want to elbow them right out of the
right.
row. And that makes me reminisce about the Newport Festival, Folk Festival, had, from what I can tell, historically, people who were music lovers that really wanted to listen to the music. And of the original artists that I've been blessed to listen to, that's the audience that they need to convert new fans. And it's
Yeah.
so wonderful that you provide that stage for them and give them that kind of exposure. I think it's fantastic.
It's a great experience to open for touring artists. It's just everybody's always graceful. And it's always just such a positive. But the one thing that I know that's going on there, and on Long Island, it's everywhere, is house concerts, and that gives people the opportunity to hear original music at all different levels.
Yeah. Let me tell you a quick backstory, which I'm sitting in people's pub with my wife, and your brother comes
Michael,
up to me,
yeah.
Michael, and he says, "Hey, you're that podcast guy." And just the look on my wife's face of, "Oh, here we go again." It was priceless. But it gave me that connection to you, and your brother does down by the creek house concerts.
Patchogue,
And
yeah.
in Patchogue, I've been to one in Seaford, a guy named George, I think, does it. And it's such a great intimate setting for like-minded people or that community. But now for you to move, I
Hey,
gotta ask you this.
one thing that
Yeah,
Michael
please.
does, I'm going to
Yeah.
be there October 5th, opening for Shanna in a Dress, who's just wonderful. Michael has locals opening, and so he has a bunch of people, opening for the touring artist. And that's just they get to write off that, that they've done that, they do it, and they connect. So, I mean, that's just a great thing. He does a great job.
Yeah, we met because we have a mutual guy artist called Pete
Yeah, I
Mancini.
know. He's great. Yeah, great guy.
Just came out with an album called American Equator, and Pete is just the nicest guy in the world. And what a rockin' album. Very diverse as well.
Yeah.
There's hints of Neil Young and Jackson Brown and all that in my mind as I listened to his album. And I thought it was really, really great. But I could ask you this, Bob, in moving to Florida or connecting in North Carolina, how did you connect with the community down there to get involved?
In Florida
Yeah.
and North Carolina?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're very social people. I just came across this, saw somebody was good. They were having a concert, and I went. And then, I was there only a couple times before they asked me to join the board. And I'm a marketing guy, and it's been a really positive. It's been over 10 years, and that's been a really positive, really just a wonderful experience working with people and putting together workshops. We had a workshop this weekend with someone from Boulder, Rebecca Folsom. She put a great workshop on. In fact, I'm going to be opening for her in North Carolina in June. So it's a funny thing. Okay, there are people that in the 60s and 70s, and they can't find people to play music. I find, that is not a problem. I always find people to play music with. I don't, it's just, you just put yourself out there. I don't really like open mics, but if I was new to a town, I would go to an open mic. And the first open mic that I went into in North Carolina when I got there, I'm still friends with most of the people I met that night. So in North Carolina, I just started going to the venue. The venue became a not-for-profit, and they knew that I had some not-for-profit experience, so we started talking, and we did a couple of workshops. We put together a songwriting circle, and I'll tell you about that a little bit.
Yeah, please.
23 people showed up for the first one there. But we do a songwriting circle that's been going on for 14 years, I think, in Fort Myers. And what it is, it's just for 2 hours, you show up and you sit around the circle and you share songs that you're working on, you get critiqued on them. And it's a very common thing. And it's a great, it's one thing you can sit there, you made that little joke about your wife going, there he goes again, So either either your wife is your critic or your wife is too much of a fan. But you really can't bullshit your peers.
Right.
So sitting around with some guys and girls and sharing a song, and then you hear a song and you go like, well, I could do that, or if he could do that, I can do that, or whatever, and then people work with each other. So it's songwriting circles. I don't know if there's any on Long Island, but they're very valuable, and they could be a Sunday morning in an empty place, whatever.
Right.
Just a valuable, and then you connect with songwriters.
Yeah, I can certainly, from the experience that I've seen, people attribute their modicum of success to open mics, that springboard them into, yeah, I can do this. I've heard about songwriting circles in Queens and Brooklyn where they sit around and they'll throw a topic out
Right.
and try to write a song
Right, a prompt
in a
and stuff
song
like that.
circle.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
all that stuff works.
yeah, and that's my experience has been, hey, I'm an amateur by no stretch of the imagination. And to see the encouragement and the positivity of a music community, people who love and are transparent and can emote, express the muse in ways their audience really appreciates is really, really a beautiful thing. So, Bob, let's do this. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about your early influences and that we spoke about a couple of them, how that inspired you on your musical journey. Sound good? All right, everybody, stick with us. We'll be back with the Americana advocate, as I call him, Bob Williams. Stick with us. We got more to come.
The Long Island Sound is here to help you connect with local artists. Follow us on Instagram for the latest up-to-date podcast episodes and also to connect with your local artists and their upcoming shows.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. We're with Bob Williams. Bob has such great insight into writing songs. But, Bob, I want to get into your early influences after the Beatles. You talked about the Byrds a bit. Where did it progress from there? Is there any top 3 artists that you say, yeah, this is the guys or gals I really wanted to be like?
Well, it's kind of funny because, I think one of my brothers, I have 5 brothers, 2 sisters.
Wow.
So there was always music around. One of the things that was interesting, I grew up, there was Bob Dylan in the house. We were Irish. We had the Clancy brothers, Peter, Paul, and Mary were doing their thing. And at some point in my life, I realized that they were all best friends in the village. They all had the same manager, and that was an interesting thing. So I think the Clancy brothers too, that Irish folk music thing was there for me. But then one of my brothers came home with the first Neil Young album.
Okay.
And that was right up what I was, I remember Cat Stevens' first hit. It wasn't the first time he went away. He had that Wild World, and then he went away after that. And I thought that was a simple song to play, and that was an incredible song. Then later on, Cat Stevens like that. But Jim Croce,
For the Tillerman.
yeah,
I remember that.
So I prefer to hear like I love Jason Isbell, but I prefer to hear, and I've seen him a bunch, but I'd rather see him with solo, than with the folk because I'm really into. I want to hear the words. I want to hear the emotion. That's what I really want to hear. So I was never really a big rock guy. Rolling Stones was always there, but I was never really a big Rolling Stone fan until I read Keith Richardson's biography of life, and then I truly fell in love with the man. Just reading it, stuff like that. So I wasn't, Cream and all that stuff, Blind Faith. I may have had the albums and stuff, but that wasn't what I was trying to do. That wasn't really what was doing it for me. It was folk singers.
Right.
I'll even throw in Burl Ives.
Sure.
So
it's what's interesting to me is the family connection. Having so many siblings started making me reminisce of stealing my sister Christine's albums and playing them. And then I had older sisters and 14 years older than me who were the Beatles and the Beach Boys. So I had those albums. So I got a cross genre influence. And then for me, everything in high school is what you gravitate. And I'm a huge Neil Young fan. I'm really excited that he's started touring again. He was just out in California with Joan Baez, and good to see him back on the circuit. He's a very interesting cat.
Steve Earle said something really. I went to a Steve Earle camp for a week.
Okay.
He said something really interesting. He said, what made the music, and I put this in a song. So anybody out there who's a songwriter, I already put this in a song. He said what made music so incredible going into the 70s and whatever was you had Bob Dylan, the voice of a generation, John Lennon, the rock star, and they switched places. And when you think about that, John Lennon became the voice of a generation and Bob Dylan became the rock star. He just like, how do you compete with that kind of thing happening in our lifetimes? And to experience that and what that did to music, that's pretty incredible.
Right. Even
That we lived
even
through
when
that.
I think of Don McLean's song American
Yeah.
Pie, the jester stole Elvis's crown, basically, which was, from what I believe, was Dylan and his move. And what's so amazing, especially with the movie that just came out, A Complete Unknown, uh, how my daughter's age, the 20, 30 somethings are getting reintroduced to Americana, really, when you get down to it.
Yeah, I didn't mention Dylan as an influence, but obviously there's no question Dylan's an influence. He's an influence on everybody. So I got to see him
Yeah.
a couple of times when he was playing with the Heartbreakers. That's one time I was happy to hear an acoustic guy playing rock.
Yeah. In fact, I saw the same grouping with Tom Petty in
Yeah.
Madison Square Garden.
Tom Petty also is one of my big songwriting heroes. Someone asked me recently if there was anybody alive or dead that you could play with, who would it be? And I said, Tom Petty, number one, because it's all cowboy chords. Okay.
Right.
I could do G A minor all day long with him.
Yeah, and he used simple chords with great lyrics to
Yeah.
tell a great story. Now, Bob, in your songwriting, and I believe this is true of every songwriter, they're great storytellers. What comes first? The question I'm going to ask. What
Yes.
comes first?
Generally, what I do is I should grab them, but I have a notebook so I just write down a line in. But I also have another book that I write down chord progressions. So when I hear, there's somebody right now, I can't pronounce it. There's a guy that every day puts up like a crazy chord progression, and I'm up at 7 in the morning. And if I see that, I grab a guitar and I'm playing. Is this going to work for me? If I like it, I should take it because it's different, But what comes first to me is just an idea, a word. But sometimes the word doesn't end up in the song. That's the funny thing. The other day, someone was saying that they had a company that the person was an emotional vampire. They just kind of were down on everything. I tried so hard to put emotional vampire into the song, and anybody wants that line, they could have it. I ended up writing about Chicken Little. Okay, that was much easier.
Sky is
At
falling.
the same point across. Okay, So basically, I will have an idea line and I'm free writing as fast as I can. And then when I start putting it on the computer, typing it, that's when it really starts to become like the first. And then I ended up printing it off like 100 times. But the first time I print it off, and I date everything. So the first time I do that, that's when it's becoming a song. Or if I have a little something going with the music, I might put it on my phone right away. Like most people, I have a recording, simple recording studio set up at home and all that to record. So it'll generally be just a spark. And I'm always looking for a spark. I don't get up to write the next song. I'm not worried about the next song. I don't even think about it because it's always going to happen. It's never not happened. It always happens to me. Something comes along.
What amazes me, and I think what separates a songwriter from the general public, like myself, is you act on it, and then you get wired that way. In my
I'm like
opinion.
5 hours a day some days. Not honest to God. I'll work on something. I'll work it and then the pile of ones that you don't keep is this big,
Right.
compared to the ones you keep. I try to keep at least 40 songs that are my most best ones that I play. I played a brewery recently that wanted original music only, and I played 33 original songs. That's my record, and and that's just like heaven. You want
By
original
the way,
songs?
that's a rarity too.
Yeah,
To have
you
a
want
venue
original? Well, I
request that.
think they were just trying to beat the Ace Cap thing and but whatever. So, but I was like, all right, that's my wheelhouse, okay, and I just So that's, so then you marry the two, Another thing that I do is I will go through guitar tabs and just play songs that I never heard of. I don't know who they are. And I'm just looking for chord progressions. One of the things that they've said, if you would like to write a song and you haven't written a song, go take a song that you already know how to play and love and write a new verse for it. And that, they say, is a great way to get started. And then you could just change some chords around. The one thing about me, and it's not a good thing, but it is who I am, I have never sat down and really tried to learn a song like the record. When I do a bunch of covers and for the right situation, but I play them like I wrote them. And I have a friend that I sit with once in a while when I'm running through songs, and he'll go, "That's too far off. Forget that. Okay. That's not going to work. The other thing is, if I end up playing a cover song that I really am singing it really well and I get people like it, I'll just go home and rewrite that, make my own song. I'll just write my own song to that, because
That progression.
that
it's
progression
funny
and even that melody to a point, just get that same emotion. So
that
it's
that's
all
I can
about.
I can so tie into that because the first time that I played in public, I stole the chord progression from an Everly Brothers song to write a birthday song for my wife's 50th birthday. Okay. Through a surprise party. She said, "Don't do a surprise party or I'll effing kill you." Well, then I did it. And I sang it with my daughter. And that was the first thing we did. Exactly what you said. I just took that chord progression and it was a great starting point to work off of. It was a lot of fun.
I'm like, if you're gonna do the song, just if you're really gonna, if you're good enough to do the song like the record, well, then you could be a tribute band and make a lot of money, because that's
Right.
that's the people making monies right now.
Yeah, but I've also, and I've said this before, I went and saw Jackson Brown when he had the Running on Empty concert at Nassau Coliseum. And to be honest, loved all the songs. Very disappointed. It was exactly like the album. And you know what? If I'm familiar with the song and you're doing it in your style, that's kind of cool. That's a kind of a good place to go. I want to take it in a different direction, Bob. Tell me about your connection to North Carolina, that music scene, and the work you're on the board there, and the work
Well,
that
I'm not
you
on the
do.
board there. I'm on something.
You're not on the board there.
I'm on
Okay, I gave you a
on
promotion.
the steering committee. I've been told.
Oh, okay, all right.
So
Well, you never know.
yeah.
Tell me about that scene.
Well, that's, like I said, that is a whole. I'm leaving in about 3 weeks to go up there, and we wanted to be 20 minutes to Asheville, anywhere. We
Okay.
ended up in this little town east of Asheville, Black Mountain. We don't even go, there's so much music in Black Mountain, house concerts and venues and great music. We don't even go to Asheville because there's just, there's probably 5 people that have stages in the backyard up on a mountain or whatever for house concerts. And there's, and when you walk into a brewery or wherever you're going, they're playing, now, they also a lot of bluegrass. Bluegrass is kind of new for me, so I enjoy that too. I'm not a bluegrass player. I have a bluegrass story.
Yeah, please.
Well, the bluegrass story is somebody posted, there was a retreat center, and they said, come on in and learn the etiquette of bluegrass. So there's a whole thing where
Okay.
you step in, step out, who takes the, and I know a lot of that, but I don't really have bluegrass chops, even though they're
All
really
right.
G, C, and D. I don't really have that strum. I have the Bob strum, not that strum. Anyway, so I go to this thing and I show up. I'm the only guitar player. There's 15 fiddle players.
Oh my God.
And that just wasn't going to work. But they gave out a book and there was a song in there, and I took that book, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to write a bluegrass song. I really worked on hard to get a little different strum. So I Googled what is the most popular themes of bluegrass music. And it came out, it said, trains. And then it also said a couple other things. And it said pine trees and well, now I got, and broken dreams or something like that. And I'm like, boom, got a song. Pine trees and broken dreams, that's, but anyway, the music scene up there is just a wonderful scene. There's just so much music, acoustic music. It's just, I don't know what to say. I mean, there are people out playing covers. I have some friends that do all that. stuff like that. But it's just it's a great, but it's not rock bands playing 80s stuff.
Right. But it sounds like the people in that area, that's what they enjoy, you know. And I miss that in clubs. I'd rather be in a more intimate setting listening to music. By the way, bluegrass is new to me. I had the Gibson brothers on, who are apparently pretty famous bluegrass guys. How they found me, I don't know. Then a bluegrass band from Brooklyn, New York. And
Great.
I didn't realize this. Bluegrass, there's no percussion. It's right. It's
Well,
fiddle,
yeah,
bass,
there's
maybe.
generally there's not a drummer, right? Yeah.
Right. And so I got educated. I got
It's funny.
educated on that.
In the 10 years that I've been involved, I've helped put on hundreds of concerts with touring artists. Only 2 or 3 people have ever showed up with drums, and that's even Americana. Now they're touring on a low budget.
Right. And it's a pain in the ass to drag drums around for
Yeah.
sure.
And then the drummer wants to write a song. All
And then they're thrown
right,
out of the
now we're going to
band.
be in trouble. Okay, stop.
Hey, where do you see Americana? Where do you see the genre going from your experience, and what's happening in the streets, in the grassroots of it? Because you're really connected at the
Well,
grassroots level, I would say.
that's I don't have the answer for that. I just feel that um, you know, the bad thing about music is that Taylor Swift gets all the oxygen.
Right.
The good thing, and I have nothing against Taylor Swift because if anybody,
She's phenomenal.
nobody else can
Songwriter.
do what she's done.
Right.
But the other part of the thing is that also that just means there's the internet has created a, no matter what you come up with, there should be a market for you. There should be somebody that wants to hear you if you could figure out how to reach those people. I mean, so I think that is a big part of it. I think the biggest thing that's going to be, I don't want to go off on a tangent, is what's going to happen with AI. Is someday Spotify just going to put in generated so that they even have to pay the 2 cents or 1 cent, computer, whatever's going
Right.
to happen. That is a whole nother can of worms. But I think the good thing is that I think people are always going to write songs. They're always going to write songs, and it's just, I love playing with a fiddle player. I love playing with a lap steel guy, or just all this different stuff. And the good thing is, all those people need to play with somebody. Like if you're a bass player, you need to play with somebody.
Right.
No one's listening for a bass solo. So I think folk Americana music is always, there's always going to be, I think jumping all around the place. Good luck editing all this. Like Jason Isbell coming out with a new acoustic album. Okay, just him and a guitar. To me, it's a wonderful album. Jackson Browne did that a few years ago. He did 2 albums, just him on the acoustic guitar. I quit those, and that kind of music, I don't believe that's going to go away.
Yeah, this is what I believe. I believe that if you look at the social experiment of social media, there's a disconnect. We're on social media, but we're less social. How do you connect with just hearing something? For me, maybe it's a guy thing. I don't know. I need to see the connection, and I'm always promote go see him live, go see somebody live. One, to support the musician, but then you have a dynamic of connection when you're in the room with somebody. And to me, a great entertainer, great singer songwriter are the ones that make me feel, I don't care if there's 100 people in the room, make me feel like I'm in their living room and they're singing to me.
Right.
And they're singing songs and emoting things that I'm feeling but may not be able to express. Can't do that through just hearing something on Spotify. And that's just me. I think that's going to be the saving grace of any genre, but I think particularly for Americana, because like you said, there's that connection.
It's not over polished. It doesn't get lost in the
Right.
production of it. I don't want to knock country music, but if I listen to country music, I'm just listening really because listen to how creative they are with the rhymes, because they have everything, 7 people in a room, make sure everything rhymes.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna knock country music because what I think, my wife's a big country music fan. She played it in the butcher shop all the time. Just talking about this other day, she said, I reminisce old country. I wish it was coming back because I listened to, there's a country music now station in Long Island, 103.1, The Wolf. And to me, every song sounds like a copy of the next song. And I'm like,
But that's what they
it's just,
do in Nashville. Okay.
it's
If you go,
disappointing.
if you're in Nashville, you're writing the song that sounds like the hit song right now,
Right.
because that's the thing. But it's interesting when you're a singer song and they're going to sell the song, whatever. Singer songwriters aren't really, pretty much singer songwriters are not bought. They have so much material, they're not going to use somebody else's material on their albums. Very rare do you see that. It happens, but
Yeah, I mean, how confining to creativity to be in the mindset, okay, it's got to be this. I mean, they did this years ago. Anything over 2.5 minutes, it's not going to get played on the radio, and other things. And then when you get into the artists that we've been blessed who've broken out of the mold, and I'll even go into like Lady Gaga, she just goes in 14 different directions, always recreating herself. I think that's a great creative process because it's so freeing. And that's in thinking about our interview tonight, our conversation tonight. I was really tying into that early statement of the influences of R&B and roots rock and that sort of thing that gives Americana a broad appeal, I think, and maybe saving grace to music. Who knows?
it's all good. It's all good. It's just, my favorite thing is to perform. I love being in a room where I can tell the stories behind the songs. I'm also in a band with three other songwriters, the Pearl Street Band. But it's hard to get shows that are all original music. We get a couple a year, but they're few and far in between. So, but that's my thing. I'm really excited about. I'll be on Long Island October 5th to play at Michael's, and I guess people can find out more about that between you and me.
Oh, yeah. By the way, I do want to say, hey, listen, we'd love for our audience to comment, ask questions. I respond to every comment on every video. We want to know your opinions, your insights. You think I said something wrong? Tell me. And look in the description. You'll get Bob's information and website and all the things he's is connected to. Bob, I got a question. How do artists find you to go through these different, whether it's in Fort Myers or North Carolina? How do you come upon these artists to play?
Well, it's not just me. We have a music. Well, we have everybody knows the person that does the booking is the holy grail of the venue. And they all have their friends and they all have their people they like. So it's always a tricky thing. We
Agreed.
have a music. What I personally do is book the opening acts and all the local music. So we have a music committee because any venue, any good venue, you know, gets things all the time. People looking to play. And the problem that we have, we run our venue all year round, every Saturday, almost every Saturday night. But everybody really just wants to come to Florida in the winter. So it becomes difficult, so that becomes difficult. So it's always that kind of thing. But breaking in, it's the same thing. When someone runs a house concert, they are playing new people, but they're playing, a good rule of thumb to try to follow is 30% people you had last year, 33% people that you had in the past, and 33% new people. The one nice thing about the venue in Florida that I'm involved with is we're a not-for-profit where we're not worried that you're going to put people on the seats.
Okay.
You don't have to have a following. If we like you, we're going to book you and we're going to get enough people in the room. And if you don't, we're going to guarantee you enough money to make it worth your while. So we're very fortunate that way. The venue in North Carolina is a bigger venue. They run stuff all, 7 days a week. You really need to have a following to get in there.
Yeah, and that's the conundrum for many of the
Yes.
young artists that I spoke to. The first question is, how many Instagram followers do you have? Give me some videos that you've done for yourself. There's a huge investment in the media, and you, as a marketing person, it's an investment to try and prove your worth, so to speak, because it's a business and they want to know how many people, I'll put some people in the seats as the venue, but who are you going to bring is always the question.
Yeah.
So it's refreshing to see a nonprofit
Act like a
perpetuate original
not-for-profit.
music. Yeah, right. Yeah. Most of us want for-profits to act like nonprofits.
Right, it's not going to happen. And then, and the people that think that the venue guys, walking out with bags of cash is just not realistic.
Yeah, this the economy and everything else, and COVID struck all these locations that many are not in business anymore because of that. So you're coming up to Long Island in October. So we've got that, and you're going to North Carolina in a couple of weeks, right?
Yep, believing. Last year we were up there for Helene. We were stuck for 5 or 6 days before we could get out. We came back down to Florida for Milton. So we got that. And then we were just in Nashville 2 weekends ago. And we had tornadoes every day and every night. So
Maybe you should stay in Florida, Bob.
I don't know where
Just saying.
I think we're going to spend the month of October in the car, just trying to figure out where there's no safe place to be, you know?
That's great. Hey, Bob, it's really been a pleasure talking to
Thank
you
you.
about what you're doing in these music communities. What I love about music, I don't care where you are, you can find a community that's going to support musicians and music. Just got to find them. And particularly these song circles, we got to get them moving up here on,
When
on
when
Long
they
Island.
they're like moths to the light. If someone makes the opportunity, people are going to come out of the woodwork. They're going to show up. That's the main thing.
I got somebody in mind, my guitar teacher. I'm going to talk
Yeah.
to him about it.
But I just want to say, all my music is on my online. I have 4 CDs, like solo, one with a band. I have probably 50 videos on there.
Wow.
So, I'm always posting, always working. So if you want to track me, if you're from Long Island and you remember me and you want to track me down, you can find me on Facebook and find me on my website or whatever, or find me through the
Yeah. And
connection
it'll be
that
all in the
Steve puts
description.
on there. I'd love to hear from you. So.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And this is
Again,
such
Bob,
a great thing. I'm so glad, it's not just the musicians doing this. Steve, what you're doing is such a wonderful. When I first heard about it, and I thought it sounded great, and then I went and I listened to a couple videos, and I was like, not whatever you want to call it, podcast, and I was like, this guy, this is great. This guy's really into it, and it's
I
real
appreciate
enjoyable,
I appreciate it very much.
So,
Thanks. Thanks so much. Well, everybody, until next time, as I always say, be generous with your joy, keep your spirits high, and let the music take you on a journey. Be well, everybody.